We didn't even have to discuss supply chain during my administration because it was a perfect moving machine. It was beautiful.
That was Donald Trump speaking to Sean Hannity about inflation. And of course, unsurprisingly, Trump thinks that his economy was the best. It was the biggest. He never did anything wrong. The supply chain was moving along smoothly. And of course, there was criticism to follow the statement you just heard toward Joe Biden, because it's all Biden's fault that we're experiencing inflation as we speak. Now, Sean Hannity did ask Trump, to his credit, what his solutions would be if he were president. How would you combat inflation? Let's take a listen to what Trump had to say.
They're not going to be able to survive if this continues. If you're president, what would you do?
So what you're saying sounds very easy and sounds very simple. Not actually that simple, but I will tell you, this is like the biggest tax increase in history. If you look at what inflation is doing, and I saw a number today that wages can go up, but they're nowhere near what's being taken out of families by pure inflation. Just the cost of bread, the cost of gas, the cost of gasoline, the cost of everything. Everything is up. And then supply chain. You go to stores and they're half empty. Many stores, they can't get product. They can't get anything. You go to luxury stores or non-luxury stores or supermarkets, and the shelves are in some cases half bare, and nobody's ever seen it. We didn't even have to discuss supply chain during my administration because it was a perfect moving machine. It was beautiful. We created the greatest economy in the history of the world.
Okay, so what would the solution be again? By the way, all sorts of lies sprinkled in there, including that shelves are empty. Shelves are not empty. Shelves are totally fine. There are supply chain issues, but I am curious what Trump would do in response to those supply chain issues, including the fact that China is undergoing another COVID-related lockdown, which has had an impact on the supply chain. So what would Trump do? Force the leader of China to lift the lockdown? Because it wouldn't work that way, I guarantee it. But there are other things I wanted to just quickly mention before going to you, Dr. Ritchie, because Tom Cotton is also one of these right wingers who wants to use inflation, which is real, as a political tool against Biden. He wrote a recent op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. They love to be the professional stenographers for Tom Cotton. And he wrote this in his op-ed: the Fed's core mission is to ensure stable prices and a sound currency. No one can seriously argue that it accomplished this mission under Powell's, meaning Jerome Powell's, leadership. After years of reckless policy, inflation in December of 2021 exceeded 6%, the highest rate in 30 years. Now, the Federal Reserve makes decisions about interest rates, and they tend to raise interest rates to cool inflation. Okay, and to be sure, that is what the Federal Reserve is engaging in as we speak. That's why you've seen a little bit of a change in the stock market. The market is a little bit of at a standstill because increasing the interest rates means that it's more expensive to borrow, right? And the reason why you do that again is to respond to inflation. Cotton continues to write, the Fed has manifestly failed during Mr. Powell's tenure, further rigging our economy in favor of the wealthy while working people suffer. There must be consequences for such failure. Powell is not the right choice to lead the Fed. Believe it or not, I actually agree with that last statement from Tom Cotton. I think that the behavior we've seen from the Federal Reserve has been reckless. It's been dangerous, and what we've seen is private equity firms taking free money from the Fed, and what do they do with that money? They've been snatching up single residential homes throughout the country, buying up entire neighborhoods at a time when we have a housing crisis, and that has further exacerbated an already terrible housing shortage and housing crisis. So if you're gonna get interest-free money from the Fed, why wouldn't you invest it and increase your profits? And that's exactly what private equity firms did. But what's really interesting is I didn't know that Tom Cotton had a problem with Donald Trump because one of the people who wanted to keep interest rates low was Donald Trump. He might have forgotten about that, but I'm here to remind him. Let's watch.
If we had a Fed that would lower interest rates, would be like a rocket ship. But we're paying a lot of interest and it's unnecessary.
We have a gentleman that likes raising interest rates in the Fed. We have a gentleman that loves quantitative tightening in the Fed. We have a gentleman that likes a very strong dollar in the Fed. So with all of those things, and we want a strong dollar, but let's be reasonable. You understand that.
If the Fed didn't raise interest rates, frankly, it would have been much higher than 3%. And the stock market, as high as it's been, would have been at least, I think, probably anywhere from 7,000 to 10,000 points higher. But they wanted to raise interest rates. You'll explain that to me.
So Rashad, perhaps Trump didn't have a solution to inflation because he would actually exacerbate it and make it much worse, especially as someone who certainly loves to take out loans. He's probably looking out for his own interest rates.
That's right, 100%. And if someone actually believed that Donald Trump was some kind of economic, financial, business genius while president of the United States, that back and forth should have expelled that ridiculous sentiment. Hannity, once again, like you said, to his credit, figured out how to ask a real question that obviously wasn't scripted. I'm sure they scripted a lot of this stuff. He got one in that wasn't scripted and Trump didn't know what the hell to do, all right? So what does Trump de-evolve into? He goes to his talking points, right? That's his default setting, is a talking point here, a talking point there, and he gets to continue to cruise forward. Now, he said something quite interesting in that interview. He said his administration, and I quote, did not discuss supply chain issues. Well, that was the problem. Okay, you all just didn't talk about it. There was no solution. There were supply chain issues during that time. And if you remember the infamous tariff wars that Donald Trump created that also increased the cost for farmers, the cost of goods right here in the United States of America. China won that war, by the way. He lost it, and a lot of Americans lost out on it too. And let me go back to something that's not talked about much as it relates to inflation. There's a national dynamic with inflation, of course. There's also regional inflation that impacts multiple states at one time. Let me take you to Texas. Governor Abbott created a policy where he basically wanted to crack down on immigration, which was bull because they didn't even have the legal authority to go on these, go inside of these trucks. So he did it to slow down the supply chain coming in from Mexico. But the real reason he was doing it was to enhance inflation so that he can ride the suffering all the way to the midterm elections and to the presidential elections, because he can blame all inflation on Democrats. There was one guy who went on Twitter, one of these truckers, and he exposed the whole thing. And as soon as he exposes it, Anna, guess what Governor Abbott does? He then changes all of those policies in one day. In one day, he changed it all. Now that we have the numbers, I reported on those numbers earlier. Texas was losing $100 million a day because of Abbott. Inflation increasing. The number one catalyst to inflation is a disruption in the supply chain. Every politician knows this. And that's what he did to enhance regional inflation so that he could blame Democrats and popularize the Republican platform all the way through midterms and beyond. These cats are sick.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And I was pleased to see that the White House was finally willing to call Abbott out.
Yep.
They did it in a press release, doesn't matter, it got the attention that it needed. And sometimes when you're trying to give your constituents the illusion of effective governing, which is what Abbott was doing,
right,
comes back to bite you in the butt when you actually aren't doing anything that's substantive or helpful for the people in your state. Love to see that update.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. I really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.